To round off this year's series of Working on It, we have something very special for you indeed. It's our most widely requested topic and a very special visitor. For this, we invited down the most prolific voiceover artist in the world, and you may just have heard of him.
That's right, Will. It's me, Voiceover Man. Yes, the voice of Steam Illuminations and much, much more. Hello there, I'm Peter Dickson. I'm a voice actor. I'm a voiceover artist, and over my 43-year-long career, I've worked on many different projects, from The X Factor to Britain's Got Talent, Live at the Apollo, All-Star Family Fortunes, The Price is Right, Catchphrase, you name it, I've done it all. Even the 2012 Olympic Games. But today I'm leaving the relative air-conditioned comfort of my studio here to do something completely different. And when I say completely different, I mean completely different. I'm going to do a day's work for a change, because today I'm heading to the legendary Watercress Line to become a fireman for the day. So, welcome to Working on It.
Peter, nice to meet you. Nice to meet the man behind the voice.
Nice to meet you too.
So, you ready for a good day?
What a great day it is, not only weather-wise, but for me, this is a kind of like a boyhood ambition to ride on the footplate of a steam train.
Excellent. Well,
I've always wanted to do that, and so thank you for the opportunity.
I say you're going to be doing a bit more than riding today. We're going to give you a day in the life of a fireman. So it is, on a day like this, it is going to be kind of hot, sweaty and hard, but it is going to be rewarding, and hopefully we can show you what goes into keeping these engines running.
I'm looking forward to it immensely.
Sound good?
Yeah, sounds great.
Let's go for it.
Yeah.
I can't quite believe it. It's 6 a.m. When I was younger, I was often getting in at this time. But now the hard work begins. Our locomotive today is an S15, number 506, built in the year 1920, so over 100 years old. She's one of the staples of the Watercress Line's fleet, an interesting challenge for someone on their first day. Richard, our driver for the day, was already hard at work inspecting and oiling up, ready for the day ahead. Starting at the railway when he was 15, he's now one of the railway's footplate inspectors, one of the highest grades you can achieve. I wonder if I need to address him as Sir. Anyway, chit-chat over, there was work to be done. We had a couple of hours until we would need to leave Ropley to go and pick up our train, so time was of the essence. However, after we climbed up into the cab, Will quickly pointed out that there were a few things we needed to check and prepare before we could even think of lighting the fire.
So, before we can actually light up, there's a few things we need to check. We need to make sure the boiler's actually sound. One of the checks is water in the glass. These are gauge glasses here, tells us how much water's in the boiler. To light up, we ideally want a third to a half, and you'll notice it's quite high at the moment, and that's going to go higher as steam comes down, because it's steam actually lifting the water up. Right. Second thing is the firebox. It's in there. Now, this engine wasn't used yesterday, so they put what's called a warming fire in, which is essentially quite a small one. If you have a look in, there's a little bit left over.
Yeah.
Inside the firebox, the big concrete thing, that's called the brick arch. It has two functions. One is protect the tube plate. It also, essentially, it's a bit like an insulator jacket. So you get that nice and warm, it keeps the boiler warm, and honestly, I tell a lie, it has three. It also makes the hot combustible gases flow down properly, combust properly before going through the tubes.
Okay.
So, in a second we'll start cleaning that out. Ready to light the new one.
This is the fireman's job in the morning before
Yes.
the train starts to go into service.
Yes. We also now need to check the front of the engine to make sure everything's sound in there. So, we need these.
Right.
And we hop down that way.
Okay.
So there we go. This here is a smoke box. That's the tube plate. Behind there is where all the boiler water is. At the far end of the tubes is the firebox. All the hot gases get carried through, up through here. This is called a blast pipe. And essentially, once we get going, it'll start drawing air through. What we're checking for essentially is make sure all the pipes are in good condition. We don't want any steam leaks, because worst case it blows back through to us.
Right, we don't want that.
Fire comes back in the cab to say
We
hello.
don't want blowback,
Indeed.
do we? No.
Another thing you can get is this spark crystal can get clogged. So it means the blower, which is this tube under here, which when we get steam bound, once we turn it on, it will start drawing the fire through. If this is clogged, it won't do much.
You've really got to have your wits about you on these things, haven't you? I mean, they are
There.
Marvels of engineering, but also quite dangerous places if you're not careful.
Yes, so this engine is 1920, so over 100 years old. And it sounds romantic, but equally it means there's a lot more coaxing and refining.
So, with everything looking satisfactory in there, Will closes the smoke box door and we head back up into the cab to check the firebox over for any leaks and to clear out the spent ash from the previous day, which involves using some ominous-looking overly heavy rakes. The idea here is to ensure the grate is left with as little debris as possible from the day before, as anything left over would reduce the airflow required to keep the fire going. No air means no fire, which means no steam. No steam means no service means angry passengers. Not ideal.
That's what the man said, the back is clean. Now we need to get a bigger rake. So I've told you this is a long firebox. The longest rake, just to go back, goes to the front.
Right, okay.
The challenge is, when you're firing, you need to be able to get coal down to there.
Right.
That is part of the art.
While doing this frankly filthy job, Will explains how 506 has what's called a fixed grate, which you lay the fire on. Later locomotives feature more modern rocking or drop grates, which allow you to drop the old fire with relative ease, compared to what he's putting me through this morning. Well, with the firebox suitably cleaned, we begin laying our fire. And my first chance to shovel some coal.
Yes. You'll get better at this throughout the day. Try and keep your feet planted. You're quite tall like me.
You've done that before, haven't you?
Oh yes. So if you swap your hands over on the shovel, so right hand down to the front,
Yeah? No, right hand.
and then,
Like this?
yes, then you can rotate round and chuck it in.
Oh, yes.
Now, don't laugh. It's more difficult than it looks. No, really, it is. I mean, how difficult can it be? Shovel some coal and chuck it in a hole. Very, it turns out. Quite how I'm going to manage this once the engine is rattling along the line is, well, anyone's guess.
This firebox is about 10 feet long, so
Really swing it through.
one little tip, when you go for the swing, don't think you're going to hit the door. Because if you look at the door, you think you're going to hit it, you will hit it. Super. Right, that's all lit. Well, sorry, that's all in. So the next thing we're going to do is chuck some wood on. We're going to chuck some oily rags on the wood and light it up.
Okay.
So, well, where I want you to put it, technically is just put it on and chuck it in. We ideally want it down the front half of the grate. Leave 3 or 4 bits out, and I'll quickly grab some oily rags. All of this stuff here, these are oily rags we've used for cleaning.
Soaked in what, paraffin or something?
Yeah, a mix of waste paraffin and oil. So essentially, it's a substance which there's not really much use we have for it, apart from actually lighting up.
So this is the old traditional way of doing things, is it? This is the way it's always been done?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you come down here,
Yes.
if you light up the bottom of the rag, it should go up pretty quickly. There, hold that. And once it's really going, rotate it 90 degrees this way just so no nails get caught. And launch. Super, that's the front set lit.
So you want to go, this one's got to go front again?
So just to that middle section there, which is going nicely. Rest is kicking off pretty smoothly, so if you want to chuck that last bit of wood in. Super.
Just like that?
Just like that.
And then we just have to wait now to that.
Yes and no. So that's going to start cooking the wood. We then need to start putting some coal on top of it to get that cooking as well.
Right.
So it's sort of a constant feeding process now. On the driver's side of thing, Richard, our driver, he's currently going around oiling up and inspecting the locomotive for the moving parts of it. As firemen, we are interested in the boiler and steam generation bit. It's a bit of smoke at the moment. The blower, which I showed you in the smoke box, once we get enough steam, we can start using that. And that'll start drawing air through the tubes out the top and also increasing that steam generation rate.
Okay.
So yes, this is why we have 3 hours to prep.
So, with the fire lit, and both of us smelling of oil and paraffin, we continue prepping the locomotive for service. That is, until mercifully we were interrupted by a shout that brings joy to many a railwayman. Tea's up. This welcome break in proceedings gives me the opportunity to ask a little more about the fireman's role on the footplate, because in, well, a few hours from now, it will be down to me to keep this hungry beast fed and watered.
So you have, the fireman has a specific role to play, not just, looking after the fire, but also
Yes.
there's certain safety things that you have to deal with as well.
Yes, so when we're coming into a platform as well, we'll be looking out for people who might try and open the doors too early. We can stop the train in emergency if needed to. So there's a lot more to running the trains day to day, and also a lot more knowledge. So stuff breaks. The driver will know what to do about it, but also the fireman should know a fair bit of how to troubleshoot first. So for example, if our injectors, which is how we put water in the boiler, if they start playing up, I should know some of the causes, what we can do to deal with them. Sometimes it's a relatively simple fix. Sometimes you have to fail the locomotive. At the end of the day, we're dealing with what is a bomb.
Tea break over. We get straight back to work, cleaning the locomotive and bringing the boiler around to pressure. Shoveling away, I begin to wonder how much coal this locomotive uses in a day. And where on earth do you actually get it from?
Talk to me about the coal, because we don't have any coal mines in the UK anymore.
No, the last one has been closed. We get coal now wherever we can get it. Interesting, there's different types of coal. So the one that's been in the news lately, a fan in Wales, is Welsh steam coal. But believe it or not, that's actually not ideal for us. This is called hard coal. Welsh steam coal is called soft coal. Essentially, this stuff is a bit like rocket fuel. You put it on, you get a bit of black smoke, you get heat instantly. Welsh coal, it takes a bit more time cooking it in the firebox. It takes a bit more to get going, but you get constant source of heat. So they were really popular for narrow gauge locomotives, small firebox. Great Western locomotives, they were designed to work with it because it was in their region. These ones were designed to work with hard coal. And also our line is sort of straight up and straight down. So we sort of want heat on going up. We also want to have no heat going down because we're just generating steam.
So you can regulate this much more easily. Yeah.
So at the moment, coal is imported. We used to get a mix of Russian coal, Colombia, Australia, and the price of coal is going up. And it's a real problem for heritage railways.
Yes.
I mean, this time last year, or a couple of years ago, coal was about 150 quid a tonne. So that's quite a lot considering we'll use maybe 2 or 3 tonnes today. It's now 300, 400, maybe 500.
Wow.
Steam railways, they are...
Makes you wonder what the future is for all heritage railways. Is there a big enough market for in the world to extract this coal? Just because I don't know who else uses coal. There are coal-fired power stations.
There's power station, yeah. So they use a different type. It's we use what's called kind of clean washed coal. So when you take it out of the mines, you get a mix of like powder and dust and lumps. Powder's not useful to us. We want the lumps. So there's washing plants that kind of separates it all. Powder goes to power stations. I assume we get the lumps. But yeah, it's something that people don't like talking about because it's a real problem. These engines are designed to work on coal. In America and other places, they had engines designed to work on wood. Could be an option. And BR days, oil firing, yeah. So GWR tried it with their standard gauge. I'm not sure how well it went, but they didn't last so long. Narrow gauge engines, they worked quite nicely on oil. In America, they work off oil with some of their locomotives. You can see them because there's always black smoke billowing out because it's what the effect of oil is. So it's a hard question. At the moment, there are still mines out there, but it's now becoming more and more expensive to import it in. So people ask why train ticket prices are so expensive for steam railways.
That's
one of the reasons. It's not just because getting it here.
Yeah.
We can try different suppliers, but occasionally we've had cases where we've had different suppliers, different prices for coal, but it's all come off the same boat. And they all have different burning. So this stuff is quite good. It's a bit like rocket fuel at the moment. It burns quite nicely, as we've seen. We had a mix. The first year with the steam illuminations, we had a load of coal which just didn't want to burn, and we called it safety coal because it wouldn't combust. But as a fireman, oh my God, it knocked all your confidence out of you because the stuff just didn't want to go.
So that steam we're hearing, is that the one in front?
Yes, so what they've got there, the drain cocks have opened. They're blowing out any steam out of the cylinders because at the moment, the cylinders are cold. So as soon as you put steam into there, it'll condense into water. Water doesn't compress, obviously. So they have little taps under the bottom. So we'll blow steam out there, warm through the cylinders, and they'll keep that open for a fair while until that cylinder is nice and properly warm because we don't want to risk putting water in there because it will start damaging the motion. The motion is so finely set to we're talking thousandths of an inch. Well, these are old locomotives, we don't want to break them.
I hadn't really appreciated the length of time it takes to get one of these going, and it's a slowly process, isn't it?
Yes.
Because you can't rush it, otherwise, as you say, you'll run the risk of overheating it, cracking something. This is 100 years old, as you say, so it's quite fragile. And you've got to change temperatures, over a period of time.
And they're expensive bits of kit as well. So to overhaul an engine, you're talking, depending on the size, $250,000 to $1 million.
What?
Flying Scotsman famously took about $4 million to overhaul, but they were trying to keep old bits. To build a brand new locomotive like Tornado, that was $3 million. Prices have probably gone up now. So these are all expensive bits of kit. And the UK, we've got this love of steam, which is brilliant because I love these as well. But they come with quite a literal price.
Yes, absolutely. An eye-watering price tag.
Indeed so, yes.
Yeah.
Food for thought. Anyway, after a couple of hours prepping and cleaning, we have steam, and we're nearly ready to go. Before we move off, though, we need a couple of finishing touches on the locomotive.
So, Peter, can you chuck that on this bracket here?
Yeah, I think I could probably just about manage to do that.
Oh, hopefully so. Right.
Yeah, that was difficult, wasn't it?
Indeed so. So on steam engines, you're going to see two things. You'll see lamps and discs. They've got two functions. The first one is to say which direction the loco's going, so discs are always at the front. They also had another function in the olden days of saying where the engine is going in the grand scheme of things. So one on top of the other. On one side could be all the way to Portsmouth. 9 o'clock is Waterloo to Southampton via Alton, which is the mid-Hants head code, which you'll see later on. The lamps are the versions for night, but also these can show a red aspect as well, so it's a tail lamp.
If you're reversing, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's literally just to prove the train is complete. The tail lamp always goes at the rear of the train, so when we've got our coaches, the guard will put one at the rear. So the signalman knows when we get to the next station, we're all complete, nothing's been left behind.
And now we have enough steam to move, but before we go anywhere, we have a couple of vital systems which we need to test.
Now, one thing we need to do is be able to prove we can put water back into the boiler. It's going to get used throughout the day in the form of steam, so we use injectors. And essentially what these do is fire steam into water and then push the water into the boiler just below the speed of sound using a selection of cones, but I'll show you a picture of that in a bit. So first thing we do is turn the water on. You'll see there's water coming out of the overflow pipe there.
Yep.
That's the injector. We then turn the steam on. You'll hear it's going to pick up on the note change. Right, so that's going. I'm now going to trim the water back and close it slowly. You'll hear the note change. And there we are, that's water going into the boiler. Turn it off, turn the steam off first, then the water. If you do it the other way round, steam just shoots out the back. So I'll do the front one first, Richard. Right, so one thing we need to do, the brakes work off vacuum, so it requires taking air out of the system.
Yeah.
We need to prove the brakes are working on the locomotive, there's no blockage. So, Richard has straightened the brake and dumped it. We now have to prove there's no blockage in there. So, I'll take this hose off. Letting air in, he shouldn't be able to make a brake. So, you'll hear a bit of noise. That's him trying to make a brake. Hopefully he'll give us a thumbs up. There we are. So that's worked from that end. We then need to go and do the same on the rear. And the reason we do this test is because if we didn't, potentially we could be taking an unbraked train. So there's a breakaway, it rolls off.
Is he just trying to brake again?
Yes, so he's proving that we put this back on properly,
yeah.
so it's accurate for the far end. So yeah, so the risk is we either can't take the brakes off, or worse, we can't put the brakes on. So that's why we're doing the test. Okay. Right, let's do the rear.
Injectors and brakes tested, we are ready to move. Ah yes, this is what it's all about. Time for all that hot steam to power those giant pistons and connecting rods to turn the enormous wheels on 506. But we aren't going far, not yet. There's coal to load and something else to do. Something I was, well, rather hoping Will would do on his own. But somehow, well, I don't think he's on the same page as me. He said something about getting, what was it, the full experience. Yes, it's the fireman's duty and probably one of the least appealing tasks you could imagine. All I can say is thank goodness I'm wearing overalls and a pair of sturdy boots. It was time to rake out the ashpan. Look, I'm going to make a cup of tea if I were you. Come back in a couple of minutes. It's not in the least bit glamorous.
So, this is the ashpan hopper.
Yeah,
These
yeah.
are the damper doors. This is the rear one. This is all the spent fire. You can see actually the
So when you open that damper, that's what
it's drawing everything. So we need to empty all this spent ash, because otherwise what happens, it will just get clogged, and then it won't do much. So one thing the ash is well, ashy and dusty. So what we're going to do is give it a wash down. Righto, mate. The hopper then goes down towards the front as well.
You have to do the front one?
Yes, it's all the same one. We need to have this nice and clean and empty. Righto, mate. You want to have a go?
Yeah.
So, we'll give it a hose down in a second. This will be quite dusty, so put it out towards you.
How exciting is that?
Yeah.
I tell you what, I shall never complain about working in a studio ever again. In an air-conditioned room.
Oh, air conditioning, yeah. The air conditioning works once you get moving.
This is about the most manly thing I've done in about 10 years.
It's mad when people say, oh yeah, I do this for fun. And it's really hard to sell the appeal, but equally, the rewards are a lot later on once we get into it. It's going to be a good day. Righto, water off. That's the back done. Now we need to go to the front.
That was pretty horrible. Underneath a 135-ton loco with great clouds of yesterday's ash falling at my feet and water dribbling down my arms while manhandling a 10-foot-long solid iron rake, well, it gave me a whole new level of respect for the firemen of old. Imagine doing that on a freezing cold morning. Imagine doing it on any morning.
There we are. That's why we wear pup overalls.
Well, I'm ready for a shower.
Yes, yeah, we'll go and get changed.
Ugh, job done. Thank heavens. Prep completed. It's only taken 3 hours. We shunted out into the platform. Before heading off to Alresford to collect our train, we hopped off to clean up, get changed into something a little smarter, and get ready for a day of top footplate action. There, that's better. I may look the part, but I still don't know what I'm doing, or even if I'll survive the day. Now, let's get this show on the road. We have passengers to collect. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to blow some steam! When I was a kid, I used to watch this show on TV called Casey Jones, set in the late 19th century. It featured the adventures of a railroad engineer called Casey Jones and the crew of the Cannonball Express, fireman Wally Sims and conductor Red Rock Smith, working for the Midwest and Central Railroad. Oh man, I used to love that show, and I think perhaps that's where my love of trains, and in particular steam trains, comes from. My maternal grandfather was a railwayman who had a hand in the development of electronic signalling, and my uncle, he worked as a railway bridge designer, so you could say I have elements of the railway in my DNA. Being on the footplate of an actual real 100-year-old working steam loco was therefore for me a boyhood dream come true, and boy was I loving it. Although nothing, and I mean nothing, can quite prepare you for what a physically visceral experience it turns out to be. After what seemed like no time at all, we rolled into Alresford and shunted onto our coaches for the day. Will hopped down to couple up, and we had a few minutes to grab some breakfast. I'll spare you from having to watch that. As the clock counted down to departure time and the heavens opened, Will begins firing and Richard prepares the locomotive ready to go. So, with all the passengers aboard, we were off. And on time too. So far, so good. As 506 huffs and puffs and slowly builds momentum out of Alresford Station. But the rain. Man, it was hammering it down. I was just hoping it wasn't on for the day, and certainly over by the time we had to return from Alton. An open cab like 506's is lovely when the weather's kind. But today, my fingers were firmly crossed. Now, Will's plan is for me to be an observer on this leg as he continues shoveling coal and maintaining the water level with the injectors telling me what he's doing as he goes. Although this is no ordinary classroom. Out of Ropley, we begin the long climb to Medstead. Richard gets us up to line speed and keeps a good eye on the road ahead. Due to the boiler being in the way, he can't see much of what's ahead without leaning out of the side of the loco. Mouth firmly shut, of course. Unless you want flies for breakfast, that is. After a brief stop in Medstead, we head out and over the top of the hill, beginning our run down to Alton. Back in the day, drivers said that taking a train over this line was like driving over the Alps due to the steep gradients either side of Medstead, making it a challenging run for both driver and fireman. This analogy didn't exactly fill me with confidence for my own attempt coming later in the day. We made it, and into Alton we go. And after uncoupling, we run around our coaches to the other end, ready for the return trip. While we're doing this, Will explains how the whole station can be worked automatically when required, without the need for a signalman. Something tells me he may have already made a couple of videos about this. With the loco coupled back up, we're ready to begin our journey back up the line. Travelling backwards, we now have the luxury of being able to see where we're going without the need to look out to the side around the boiler. However, on hot, dry days, the coal can get rather dusty, inevitably swirling around the footplate and covering it and you in the process. Well, it swings and roundabouts, I guess. We begin the climb to the summit, with 5:06 showing that she may be old, but she can still do the job. Will working furiously, chucking coal into the fire and water into the boiler, while Richard coaxes the 103-year-old locomotive up the hill, making it look, well, easy. Believe me, it ain't. So over the top we go, and after passing through Medstead, we roll down the hill towards Ropley and Alresford. Will shows me the injectors and talks about the effects they have. Aside from refilling the boiler with water, the injectors themselves use steam directly from the boiler itself, which would use some of the pressure you need to keep going. You're also putting what is effectively cold water into the boiler, cooling it down and reducing the pressure even further. The only way to stay on top of this was to ensure that you had a roaring fire to overcome the expected loss. I'm now beginning to appreciate that this is a very delicate balancing act. We roll into Alresford on time, run around, and after coupling up, Will hands me the shovel. Yes, it was my time to shine now.
Right then, Peter, we've done one trip.
Do you want to get some more coal on?
Yes, so this is your turn now. So, first thing we're going to do is put it right at the back, so right under the door. That is not the back. So let it just roll off the shovel.
Oh, you want on the back?
Literally right under the door.
I start by building what's called the back end of the fire before we set off. We need to aim for the pressure inside the boiler to be near its maximum without going over the red line of 180 pounds per square inch. Too high, and the safety valves would lift, shooting steam high into the air, making a lot of noise and wasting all the steam we'd created. Not to mention the embarrassment. Too low, however, and we'd have an uphill task of making it back when we got moving.
Super. So notice you're walking around a little bit, so to make your life easier, try and keep your feet slanted and just rotate round. Launch the shovel in.
Rotate.
Yeah. Because you'll find once we get on the run, once you're actually getting into swinging it, you'll find out a lot easier. So give it another whirl. Okay. Take it nice and gently. You've got time. Same again. Try and keep your left hand on that tee, because the reason is, when you go in, it's a lot easier to rotate the shovel left and right for those corners. So left hand on the tee, force it in, pull it back out, and then just use this one literally just to hold it.
Got it.
There you are. Right, let's have a look. So right, now when we're going along, the general principle is you do exactly the same to the left that you do to the right. You want a nice sort of, even. Almost like a little wedge all the way down. So once we get going, I'll say something like 3 down the left-hand side, close the door, we'll do 3 down the right-hand side, then a 3 down the middle, some across the front. Now the front, I warn you on this one, it's a challenge to get to. It's a really big swing, it's a long firebox. Please don't be offended if I do jump in with the shovel. Please, you do that one. But I'll try and coach you into it. It's your first time, so you've got lots of brownie points. Right, now, on the line of keeping everything level, do you want to put them on down the left-hand side? You see how the right's a bit higher?
Right.
1 o'clock. It was go time. The guard's green flag signals we're clear, and we begin our journey back up the line. Once clear of the station, Will begins instructing me where to fire.
If I do first round, I'll show you the next. So, we open the door and then go for goal. 1, 2, 3, and shut. I'd like you to do the same on the right hand side.
Okay.
So, goal ready, open the door, 1 here, 1 further down, 1 further down. Big one, kick it nearly over. Nice. And shut your door.
Three down the left side, 3 down the right side, 3 down the middle, and 3 down the front. Although chucking huge shovelfuls of coal all the way to the front requires not brute force, but a kind of golf swing accuracy, and I clearly didn't possess. I'm pretty hopeless at golf too, in case you were wondering. None of this, of course, is helped by the jerking and bucking of the loco as she thunders along the line, picking up speed. It's a skill, there's no doubt, and one I guess that needs to be learnt and practiced over time. Being a fireman is a bit like being that guy in the circus. You know, spinning multiple plates to prevent them from crashing to the ground. It's a constant flow of movement, from feeding the fire, ensuring an even distribution across the firebox, using the injectors, keeping an eye on the colour of the smoke, to monitoring the signals and assisting the driver in exchanging line section keys with station staff. There's never a dull moment, I can tell you. Into Ropley we roll, and I'm already knackered. We had a short pause, too short a pause if you ask me, to take on water before tackling the first challenge, the run up to Medstead and 4 marks. I don't know about the engine, but I could do with taking on water. I was beginning to feel more than a little dehydrated. Being a fireman is hot, hard physical work. Still, at least the weather was looking up, and this line is absolutely stunning on a day like this. We charge out of Ropley, and I'm back at it, feeding the fire and keeping on top of the water level in the boiler. Too high, and it could be carried through the regulator valve in the dome of the boiler into the cylinders, which could cause severe damage as water doesn't compress. Too low, however, and the top of the firebox could become uncovered, literally turning this locomotive into a bomb. Blimey, I can't quite believe I'm doing this. No pressure then. At least I had Will and Richard watching over me to make sure I didn't do anything too stupid. Charging up the hill now, and 506 is getting greedy for coal. I wasn't quite prepared for how difficult and physically demanding this was. Still, I have to get these passengers to their destination, no matter what. Keep shoveling, Dickson, and keep your eye on those injectors, man. When was the last time you checked the pressure gauge? And don't forget those signals. With Medstead on the horizon, I had to gauge when to stop firing. Too early and we'd run out of steam and grind to an embarrassing halt. Too late and we'd end up blowing off all the steam we'd made while rolling down the hill on our way down to Alton. Luckily, Will's been a fireman for a fair few years, so has the experience to make that judgment call. I was just trying to catch my breath and avoid falling over. With the station in sight, we make sure we have an injector running to keep the water level topped up as we head over the hill, to be ready for a surge in pressure we'd get when Richard shuts the regulator. We made it! Phew! Now it's easy sailing down the hill to Alton. Into the station we go. And after our customary runaround, it's time to prepare myself for the challenge of conquering the Alps. The run back up to Medstead is the hardest part of the line, with most of the 4-mile section being on the 1 in 60 gradient. very steep indeed when it comes to railways. Right, time to depart. We roll out of Alton and begin heading towards the start of the climb. To stand any hope of making it to the top, we need a good amount of pressure and water in the boiler without overcooking it. Over butts we go and onto the hill. It's time. There's no turning back now, son. Richard applies the power, and we begin storming our way up towards the summit. Guided by Will, I start firing. 3 shovels in the right place, shut the door, check the colour on the chimney, check the pressure, check the water, and go again. 3 more shovels this time at the back. Check the pressure, check the water, and on we go. This is relentless. We continue our mammoth climb, but unknown to me, trouble was brewing. The pressure was starting to fall. Will had a look in the fire and at the colour of the smoke coming from the chimney. There was a light spot that wasn't being reached. If we didn't sort it quickly, we'd soon grind to an embarrassing halt. Not to worry though. A few quick, well-placed shovels and we're back in business. Isn't steam marvellous? Round the curves we rattle and roll, and the summit is now in sight. We're going to make it! Hurrah! You know, it's strange to think that as a passenger, you'd be none the wiser to the challenges the driver and fireman face to take your train from A to B. But now, I have a newfound admiration for what these crews had to do and what the Heritage volunteers do today. At last, the summit. I can now breathe a sigh of relief. We made it. Okay, it wasn't exactly perfect, but not bad for a first attempt. I think I may even have seen a hint of a smile from Richard. We roll down the hill to Alresford and ready ourselves for our last round trip. I am now, I have to tell you, officially absolutely knackered. So Will, mercifully, took the shovel and offered to do the last trip. At last I can relax and enjoy the view of this majestic journey. As we chuff and puff along, I can now enjoy the Elysian fields and meadows of Hampshire and wave at a few folk who've stopped to admire the sight. The break allows me to reflect on the experience so far. 3 things strike me. 1, how utterly dedicated and professional these volunteers are. 2, how impressive the safety culture is. And 3, the sheer amount of hard work and, let's face it, raw skills that these volunteers have acquired. From the station staff to the rolling stock and track maintenance crews, the drivers, firemen, cleaners, painters, gardeners, and the admin and fundraising teams. They are all utterly dedicated to preserving the last vestiges of Britain's railway heritage for generations to come. As for my day, well, it was a bucket list item I can now cross off the list. The Watercress Line really is one of the jewels of Hampshire, and a stunning journey if you've never been here yourself. For me, today was just a mere taster in the life of a fireman. In reality, it's a serious business and there's a lot to learn. From theory to practical, it can take over 10 years to become a driver, as you need to have an incredibly broad knowledge of the workings of the locomotive and the railway, which is why all drivers start at the very bottom, working their way up from cleaner to fireman and onwards to driver. There's so much to learn, and even now, every day is a learning day. I've hugely enjoyed my time here on the Watercress Line today. From my 6 a.m. start to lighting the fire, to actively helping the old girl up those steep inclines, to stopping to chat to the people who turned out to see her. It's truly a day to remember. She may be over 100 years old, but she's still the star of the show. And with the volunteers here, and your support, she will continue for many years to come. I've got a newfound respect for the firemen of old. It's a tough job, but no doubt about it, a hugely rewarding one. With a final thanks to Richard for putting up with me, it was time for a good old wash and a quick recap with Will before heading to the pub for what will be, without doubt, the most earned pint I have ever ordered. Cheers.